Okay, now there's another corollary to this. That, there is truth out there, but we each have our own truths, and they're all legitimate. Okay, so you have your truth, I have my truth, so I make a claim, as I'm talking to my friend, that Jesus Christ is the Savior of the world. And I have some reasons to back that up. Okay, I'm not going to go into there now. But I do have some good reasons for thinking that that's a true statement. But my friend is not interested in my reasons. My friend says, well, that's just your truth, not the truth. Now, what are they doing? And here's what I say that they're doing. It's another way of saying, okay, you believe that, but I prefer not to. Now go away. It's a way of cutting off discussion. If people are interested, if people believe that there is a truth, an objective truth that is apart from belief, then we can discuss what that might be by exploring evidence and reasonable arguments. But this is a move that undercuts all that process. Says, I'm not interested in discussing evidence and reason. I just want to stay with what I'm comfortable with, and I'm not interested in hearing what you have to say. Okay, if somebody's like that, there's not much you can do, except to point out that this is what they're doing. You're just closing off discussion because you prefer to not, hear it. There's a distinction here that I believe is important. And so we'll do a little experiment here among the group. Okay, you see this list of claims? I want to see a show of hands on each of these 6 claims as to whether you believe the statement is true or not. Okay? Okay, number 1, water is H2O. Raise your hands if you think it's true. Okay? 2, the earth revolves around the sun. Okay, 3, chocolate is the best flavor of ice cream. Okay? Number 4, a computer is broadcasting this slide. Okay? Those who are close enough to see. Number 5, Christmas presents should only be opened on Christmas Day.
Amen, brother.
Okay. Number 6, it is wrong to make your dog sleep outside at night. Okay. So the first few, we had almost universal consensus. Not everyone. There were some still holding back. But some of you recognize there are 2 different types of claims going on here. One is objective and the other is subjective. Okay, now this is a really important distinction to have in your mind. An objective claim is about facts, the fact, the idea, or the behavior itself. Whereas a subjective claim is about me, the person who's talking, the person who's making the claim, the subject. So it's either the object or the subject. An objective claim is mind independent, meaning it doesn't depend what anyone thinks about it. It's still true or false, the claim. A subjective claim is mind dependent, which means that it could be, it depends on what somebody's thinking about it or their experience. An objective truth or an objective claim or an objective fact is true even if no one believes it or no one knows about it. There is a rock right now on the far side of the moon that no one knows about. But it's there. I'm just making that claim. Okay, that's an objective truth claim. If it's subjective, it can be true for me, but not anyone else because it depends on my own experience. Okay, you got those? Okay, here's how it breaks down into those 6 questions. The black ones are objective claims. The blue ones, about chocolate and about Christmas presents, they're subjective. And that's why we had such a difference of opinion about those. Okay. So things like, tastes, preferences, those are subjective. You like chocolate, I like pistachio nut. Okay. They're both true, depending on who's doing the talking, who's doing the claim. It's fine. Now we get to things like moral or religious claims. So the last one is a moral claim. I tried to find one that's rather benign. About having your dog sleep outside. Some people are very insistent that that is a wrong thing to do. Other people say, it's a dog. Let him sleep outside. Is that an objective or a subjective claim? What do you think? Okay, Keith, why do you think it's subjective?
Because you might think it's right and I might think it's wrong.
Okay. Anybody think it's objective? Yes, Lee.
Yeah, because you're making a statement that if the dog sleeps outside, something will go wrong. That is really subjective in what I feel. But that is almost a universal claim that everybody should not allow their dog to sleep outside. And the question is, so go check out and see dogs who slept outside, what's happened to them? Don't. I mean,
Okay.
I think it's an objective claim, but it's a subjective feeling.
Okay, Lee, so what you just said, I want to zero in on a sentence you said. You said something like, when the claim is made that it's wrong to make your dog sleep outside, you're kind of imposing that on everybody else. It's an obligation that everybody should accept.
That's right.
Okay. That means it's objective. If it's an obligation that applies to everyone, regardless of whether they believe it or not, that is objective. If, as Keith is saying, it's an obligation that only applies if you want it to, that's subjective.
Circumstantial.
But what if we added something more, like it's wrong to let your dog sleep outside if it's minus 20 degrees?
Okay, well, you're still making an objective claim though, okay? So you're saying, well, the circumstances are shifting this now from a subjective to an objective claim. Whether it's right or wrong to have your dog sleep outside, I don't care at the moment. I just want you to understand what the difference is between an objective and a subjective moral claim is. Okay, so you get that? A moral claim that is objective means everyone is obligated to follow it. And a moral claim that is subjective means only the people that embrace it are obligated to it. The question comes, are moral and religious truths objective or subjective? Boils down to, is there an external reality to match, or does it all depend on what people believe? Is it possible, just think, is it possible for a religious or moral claim to be false? Now this is an interesting question because nowadays it's, I think, a widespread point of view that it's impossible for a moral or a religious truth claim to be false. All religious claims should be embraced as equally valid. If that's the case, then there is no objective truth to religious claims. If all claims are equally valid and it's impossible for anyone to be false. See how that works? Could the claim be true even if no one thought so or nobody knew about it? If that's the case, then it's objective, an objective claim. Now here's what I think is the case. What I've observed is that our culture, our Western culture, tends to regard all religious and moral truth claims as subjective. At least that's what they say. Now, I think when it comes to religion, that is kind of the popular way to look at things is that all religions are equivalent. All religious claims are equivalent to each other, except Christianity. Because Christianity claims that not all religious claims are true. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. John 14:6. If Jesus was right, then everybody else is wrong that disagrees with him. So that's now considered intolerant, which is the worst sin you can commit. Everybody else is tolerant of everything except this particular claim of Jesus that Christians embrace. The effect that it's had is to influence Christians in churches to back away from the exclusive claims of Jesus. So when it comes right down to it, everybody has a point of view that they think is right. And if you disagree with their point of view, they think you're wrong. And so there's the cute little secret in there, that the intolerance of tolerance. Everyone praises themselves of being tolerant for embracing everything, but that is a point of view itself. That if you disagree with, you're wrong. Even though they say nobody's wrong. You can think about that for a moment. The same thing happens with moral claims. That it's very popular nowadays to say that all moral claims are relative to the individual. You choose your own morality. Nothing is really objectively right or wrong until you press somebody on it. And if you listen to, I was fascinated at the last political season because almost all of the speeches that you heard people making, politicians were making, they were making extreme moral claims about the good that they stood for and the bad that their opponent was up to. You see this in celebrities all the time too. You know, awards ceremonies and so forth. They congratulate themselves on being very open to everybody's moral predispositions, and yet there are some moral positions that they object to very strongly. You know, abusing animals, fur, polluting the environment. Not being tolerant of gays, nowadays it's the Me Too movement against sexual predators and sexual coercion in the workplace. I think it's great. I mean, we should applaud these things of identifying objective moral truths as a piece of advice. Just be on the lookout for people in public and the claims that they're making, and ask yourself, is this a subjective or an objective view of the world? And see if they go back and forth between them. So where does morality come from then? Is another question. What is it? And we have an expert on the subject.
When it comes to ethics, I always, pretty much always, hearken to evolution. And here's the extraordinary claim, and you can evaluate this, Charlie, that not only is our size and shape, the number of fingers we have, our eye color, hair color, skin color associated with our ancestors and the genes that were passed to us through the process of evolution, but furthermore, what we feel is a result of evolution. Our ancestors, who were antisocial jerks, got pushed aside by the ones that were perhaps more social and less jerky. However, you don't want to be meek. You want to have the right level of aggression and the right level of accommodation with your fellow creatures. And when it comes to ethics, when you look at whatever scheme you feel is most reasonable to pass your genes on into the future, that usually leads to what we all consider ethical behavior.
His view of morality objective or subjective? Okay, objective. And why would you say so, David?
Well, because he's trying to, he's setting up something which, in principle, you could do an experiment on.
Okay, so he's noticing that there are moral rules that people follow, and he wants to explain what they are. He thinks that they are real moral rules. Example: it is wrong to rape. Okay, it is wrong to steal. It is wrong to abuse children. It is right to be merciful and helpful to your neighbor. Okay, so these are some truths that I think that he would agree with are objective moral truths that everybody should abide by and believe. But how do you account for such a thing? Where does it come from? And what is his answer? Evolution. In other words, over the centuries and millennia, he used the word feelings, certain feelings about behaviors tended to be passed on to the next generation because they worked. They helped the group survive. And so this is the evolutionary view of the origins of morality. Whatever behaviors tend to help the group survive over time, those are preserved within the group collective conscious. And therefore we have feelings about wanting to protect our children, for instance, and feelings about wanting to, not abuse, our neighbors and so forth. Okay, so that's the morality comes from evolution. There is a problem with this way of thinking. Think about what the problem is, and keep in mind self-refutation. So he has an objective view of morality, which means that there are certain behaviors that are good or bad in themselves. And we explain that by appeal to our evolutionary history. Here's the answer. Ethical feelings are not real moral obligations. Get that? He's explaining how ethical feelings might have been transmitted from generation to generation. But ethical feelings are subjective. See? So maybe we can explain the feelings. But if we're talking about a truly objective moral obligation, moral obligations are held between persons, for one thing. You don't have an obligation to this chair. You don't have an obligation to the earth. I mean, it's sometimes we talk about having an obligation to Mother Earth, but really it's not to the physical stuff. It's to the people that inhabit Mother Earth. Okay? So moral obligations are held between persons. He's talking about the feelings of morality. It's actually an illusion. So the best you can do with an evolutionary explanation of morality is to account for the feelings of morality or the illusion of morality, not objective moral obligations themselves. You can't get there. So on an atheistic view, that there is no transcendent source, there is no transcendent lawgiver to whom we are obliged, and instead we just get moral feelings passed on from previous generation. On that view, there is no possible way you can get objective moral law, objective moral rules in the way that we think of it. There seems to always be a sleight of hand going on in the secular world between whether a claim and an idea is thought to be objective or subjective. Bill Nye thinks he's making an argument for why objective moral rules are real. But his claim actually turns out to be an argument for subjective moral claims. And yet he firmly holds to objective moral claims. You can go on YouTube and find all kinds of opinions that he has, where he's angry about people being immoral or not giving people their rights. That's another whole subject. Where do rights come from? But just keep in mind, the evolutionary view of morality can explain a subjective, relativistic view of morality, not an objective system of moral obligations.